Okay, welcome everybody. We're going to take a second to review the theme for chapter 44, and then we're going to read and do the segment themes for chapters 45 and 46 before we dig into them a little bit deeper. So, does anyone want to help us out with a theme for chapter 44? Look whose name I see, everybody. Look at that. There's Pat. Pat, we can't see you, but we're happy to see your name. Okay. Yay, we're so excited. All right. We'll wait and see what happens. All right. Chapter 44, anybody?
I said statutes for the priesthood.
Okay. Anybody worded differently? There she is. Yay, everybody. We're going to take a minute and say, Pat, we're so happy to see you. Welcome back.
Yay.
Yay.
Hey, good to see you.
She's still on mute.
You're on
Mute.
mute.
Same old things.
Oh, happy day.
All right, we'll let you get settled. We look forward to chatting with you a bit later at prayer request time. Yay. Okay. All right. So anybody, oh, go ahead, Pat.
I said, I'm listening.
Okay. Okay, good.
Looks good.
It does look good. Okay. And so Dee Dee gave us one answer, roll of the chapter 44. Anybody want to add one or just tell us how you worded it? That was a good one. Nothing wrong with that one.
I just put rules for the priest.
Okay, good.
And the
Rules
labors.
for the priest.
And their
Okay.
labors.
Okay. Okay. Good. So that was pretty much it. And so as we looked back, chapters 40 to 44 have all been about what?
The temple.
The temple. Okay. And so we're going to continue with 45 and 46, staying in that same level of discussion. And so this time, I'm not going to list everybody who's going to read in advance because we're just going to read and stop, read and stop. So I'll just be giving a person a segment at a time, and we'll be starting with chapter 45. And if you didn't already do segment themes, you can kind of look as we go and make some notes. In some of them, verses 1 through 6, for instance, I don't have a segment theme as much as I have probably 5 or 6 bullet points, almost one for every thing. And I just listed in the side. I just write, this is what this said. This is what it said. But you can come up with an overall theme, and we'll talk about that as we go. So can we start with Fran tonight? If you would read chapter 45, verses 1 to 6, and then we'll stop and see what they were about.
And when you divide by lot the land for inheritance, you shall offer an allotment to the Lord, a holy portion of the land. The length shall be the length of 225,000 cubits, and the width should be 20,000. It shall be holy within all its boundaries round about. Out of this there shall be for the holy place a square round about 500 by 500 cubits, and 50 cubits for its open space round about. From this area you shall measure a length of 25,000 cubits and a width of 10,000 cubits, and in it shall be the sanctuary, the most holy place. It shall be the holy portion of the land. It shall be for the priests, the ministers of the sanctuary, who come near to minister to the Lord, and it shall be a place for their houses, and a holy place for the sanctuary. An area of 25,000 cubits in length and 10,000 in width shall be for the Levites, the ministers of the house, and for their possession cities to dwell in. You shall give the city possession of an area 5,000 cubits wide and 25,000 cubits long, alongside the allotment of the holy portion. It shall be for the whole house of Israel.
Okay, and this is another one. This one might have actually helped you if you tried drawing it as well, but we'll talk about some things and I'll show you what I think is helpful information I found later. Okay, So if you're going to look at this chapter, what things would you be noting? What parts are listed here? Or what's the overall thing that it's about? I guess if we're going to do 1 through 6, verse 1 does give us sort of the overview for those verses.
And
It's and, which tells us what, Jocelyn?
it tells us who the land is for and how it should be broken out.
Okay. Oh, you said land. Okay, good. So this segment is about what about the land? What's the word they use there that we could use as our part of our segment theme?
An inheritance.
It's an inheritance.
Holy,
Holy
Yes.
portion.
The
Holy portion.
portion.
the
Yes.
Lord's portion. The
So
Lord's
you can
allotment.
use division, you can use portion. What's the
Oh,
other word there?
allotment.
Allotment. So if you want to use one of those words as what these first 6 verses about,
Yeah.
that's what you would find. And then he's going to give us details, right? So verses 1 through 6, whatever you have there, are about the allotment of the land. Okay.
The Lord's
Then,
allotment of land.
okay, so what's the first thing that you learn about the allotment of the land?
How big it is?
Okay, and so you see a measurement in verse 1, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So we see that. What else do you learn?
Holy
Everything within
portion.
its boundaries should be holy.
Okay, so this is holy to the Lord, this whole area. Good. What else?
It has a place for the sanctuary.
Okay, so the sanctuary that we looked at and saw the measurements for, that whole compound has a place within this land. Okay, so that's important too. Good. So
There's
if we
a-
talk, go ahead, Dee Dee.
There's a place for the priests and a place for the Levites.
Okay, so what word could we use with priests so that you guys can continue to remember the delineation of those two groups?
The priests, the sons of Zadok.
Sons of Zadok. So priests of Zadok, or you can use Levites and priests if you remember that division, right? So we have a place for both of them. They're getting what we would call half. And you'll see how this works because we've got 25,000 in length, and then it was 20,000 overall the other way. And each group of priests is getting how much? The width.
10,000.
10,000. So it's splitting that initial block in half for the two of them. Okay. And we have one more piece of information.
There's a
Cities
city
for the
in there.
people to live in.
Okay, there's a city. And is this within that boundary or is it an additional boundary, do you think?
Oh,
additional land. It's an additional, so it runs that same length of 25,000, and then below that other section, it's going to be only 5,000 wide. Okay, can you kind of picture that in your mind? Or you could even draw that if you kind of shrunk everything, right? They're just rectangles that are almost squares. They're kind of like almost squares. And that puts the land that's got the sanctuary, where is that going to be, do you think, in terms of its placement in this area? Where would you put it?
The middle.
The middle. It's going to be in that center section. So I'm going to bring up a slide that I am so visual that I was happy to see a way to do this. So I'm going to show you, and then we can see the actual someone divided this into miles, so we can see that as well, which is helpful. Oh, this is the one I want. We'll do both. Sorry, lost my arrow. Okay, yeah, let's do share screen. Okay, so you can see that top half. This is just the priestly part, Levites, and I divided mine by Levites who serve the house, priests who serve the Lord. So that's how I did it. And then I think the sanctuary is there. I can't see it because I've got one of my toolbars in the way, but can you guys see that? Oh, there we go.
Yeah, it's there.
Okay. Okay. And do you see that measurement at the top? What this makes the length of this area, the size of this area? So it's 8.3 miles in length by 6.6 wide. So it's a pretty sizable area, even before we add what we're going to add next, which is that area for the city. So that adds another chunk right here. And what we learned was that who was it for? I've got it there, but
The whole house of Israel.
the whole house of Israel will have access to this area. Okay, other things you guys wanted to note or ask questions about before we go on?
Yeah, why are they dividing the land again?
Well, I don't know. We'll see. We're not even done. And
Okay.
that's one of the things where that's kind of your overall question for, to me, it's almost all one thing, this millennial kingdom system, all kind of adding back parts of the original sacrificial picture. And so I would just keep saying the same thing we talked about last week. What might be the purposes and what do they need to do? And remember, this is the other divider. I always have to remind myself when we're talking about this time frame, are we talking about eternity?
No.
No, we're talking about 1,000-year period. Now, in scriptures, does that 1,000-year period have a clear end?
You mean the millennial reign?
Yes.
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 Is there? Yes, there is. There's an event and an end, and then the picture of eternity, the new Jerusalem, new heaven, new earth come down. So sometimes I think, I know for myself in the past, if I was thinking about scriptures that talk about eternity, it would be much harder for me to wrap my mind around this picture than instead it's 1,000-year period that God has a purpose for. And in the past, when we've studied it in Revelation and other places, I'm not sure we ever looked that much at, well, what is the purpose of this 1,000-year time frame? And now we can look and see, well, clearly God has some purposes. We may not find out what they all are, but he's got some. Okay, any other questions? Okay, we're going to
I
end.
do have a question. It might
Okay, Jocelyn.
not be so relevant, but I just wonder why the area for the Levites and the priests was much bigger than the whole house of Israel.
Well, I don't know for sure, but do they have purposes in their areas? Are there things that are going to happen in their areas?
Yes.
Yes. And actually, I think we see even more of what will happen, that there's more in this than my big empty blank box right now. So I would hang on. Again, that's one you might get a better answer later. I'm not positive, but we might.
Okay.
That's a good question. Again, it's still a pretty big area, and again, probably a pretty small remnant. So, yeah. Of course, even now, the nation of Israel is a pretty small nation, as we've talked about many times. Okay, let's go ahead and stop sharing the screen. Okay, and we will go on with, I forgot where I started. Where did I start? Who read first? Fran, did you read first?
Yes.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. Okay, Dee Dee, would you read just verses 7 and 8? Oh, you're on mute, Dee Dee.
Yeah, you click it and you think it goes. Okay. The prince shall have the land on either side of the holy allotment and the property of the city, adjacent to the holy allotment and the property of the city, on the west side toward the west and on the east side toward the east, and in length comparable to one of the portions from the west border to the east border. This shall be his land for a possession in Israel. So my princes shall no longer oppress my people, but they shall give the rest of the land to the house of Israel according to their tribes.
Okay, so before we get to the burning questions in our heads, let's just talk about what is there that we know about. What would you, segment theme, what would you say these two verses were about?
The prince's allotment.
Okay, the prince's allotment, exactly. You could say the land for the prince or the princes, whatever you want to do there. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. We brought up the prince last time, and this just goes to show you that as I go further to read, I've already gone, okay, Chris, you were wrong last week. So I still don't have an answer, but the place I thought, the person I thought it was, is most likely not the person that I thought it was. And this is how we'll find out. I checked. Your homework does not ever have you look any deeper at the prince. They're never going to ask you one question about the prince. So what we are going to do, and I don't think we'll get to it fully tonight, I'll probably end up having you do it, but something that you can think about is start to make a list of everything you learn about the prince. And most likely it's never going to tell us who it is, but it can certainly tell us who it is not by some verses that we'll see. Does that make sense? So, for instance, what do you learn about the prince in this 2-verse segment?
Well, that he has the land so that he will no longer oppress the people.
Okay. The prince is going to get an allotment of land. And who is it that's been oppressing the people?
The princes.
The princes in general. And do we already know that from previous chapters of Ezekiel? Have we seen princes in this case means all of their princes, all of the leaders they've had. And we had all that group of all the people that started with P who were all oppressing priests, prophets, princes, powerful people, right? All oppressing the people of Israel. What's the key here? What does God say about the future? Let's have somebody else give us an answer. What is no longer going to happen? Dee Dee might have said it, but
Yeah, she did say it.
Oppress the people.
Oppress the people.
oppress the people. And why will they not need to do that? And what will the people have and what will the princes have?
They'll give the rest of the land to the house of Israel.
Right. They're all going to
According to
have
their
their
tribes.
own land. Yes, they're
Yeah.
all. The princes will have land, the people will have land, and everybody has their own parcels, which might help one of your questions, Dee Dee, already, right? We've got a reason for God to divide up this land because maybe it's going to keep peace. Okay, so that's all we know about the prince right now. He's going to have an allotment. And I think I have another picture of what, again, I got a map and then changed the map and fixed it so that I could have it sort of be my own. And I think I have, yeah, I'm going to share these slides. These ideas, I actually couldn't visualize myself. They're from my Wearsby commentary. So any of you who have that, he's the one who helped me to see what these might look like. Okay, so whoops, did it not share? Didn't share. I didn't click it, I guess. Okay. So just in general, that would be just the picture of now adding the allotment. They go on those sides, on both sides of what was already there, and it encompasses the same side. So it says, therefore, the prince. Okay, then because people know where this actually is in the country of Israel, where it resides, This is sort of a very badly, very quickly done image of here we are, here's the Dead Sea, Jerusalem, and here's where we would be. And so the prince, because it said, what did it say about his land? It's on east and west, going from where to where?
From the east to the east and the west to the west.
Right, to the border, right? And by border, it meant the border of
Oh.
the country. Okay, so that's why
Oh.
really it should go all the way over, but I can't make my squares fit
Yeah, that's right.
that angle. Okay, so that's approximate, and you would find probably better maps if you want to see them. There are people who've done these Ezekiel vision kind
Right
of
here.
maps. Okay,
It's
does
on
that
page
make sense?
179.
Yeah, if you've got the Wearsby, he shows that. I don't know if he shows it on a map, but you can find him
79.
online. Oh, he does show it in the country, I think. Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of how that would look. Does that make sense according to the passage to everybody?
So the prince's allotment or portion on east and west is considerably larger. I mean,
Yes, he
yeah, I mean,
does.
that's probably not even just scale then what you're.
Well, it's as close as I could do scale, but no, it is the same size. I did note that in the Wearsby, it is equal to the size, and then it goes way out to the borders. But watch again and see everything the prince is responsible for, and then it might make sense why he needs these allotments. Okay, that's the other thing you want to watch for. Is that's a good question. Is, well, why would his be that large? That's where making a list of everything you learn about the prince will help. Okay, and I think that we're done with maps and diagrams.
Page 179 has a picture.
In our book?
Yes.
Oh, did they tell us that?
No, I don't think so. I just happened to have it open.
I knew I saw it somewhere. I couldn't find it.
And the prince's portion is blown up on the left-hand side of it.
Oh, yes. Well, I wish I had known that earlier. I should have read my heading of
But
everything.
Weirby's is good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Weirby's good too. Yeah. But yes, they're right. Back in the appendix, you guys can find your own picture of that while I get rid of this stop share thing here. They never told us to go to that, did they?
I don't think so.
Tell us to
I
look at
I
our
can't
maps
even
in our
find
book.
it right now.
It's 179, but my pages always get screwed up.
Is that in the next lesson or
No, I guess it says Ezekiel's vision. I just don't remember them telling us to go look at it. But oh, they do. On number 1 on day 3 and 4. That's what I get for skimming on the directions on observation. So because I don't look at their directions for observation because I know what I'm going to observe anyway. So it is on day 3 and 4. They tell you to go look at Ezekiel's vision. So okay, I didn't have to do all that. Wow, I could have spent hours on more other topics today. Okay, let's go. Maybe there's a reason why I shouldn't have done that. Next person, Lori, can you read just verse 9 for us?
Right there.
Thus says the Lord God, enough, you princes of Israel, put away violence and destruction and practice justice and righteousness. Stop your expropriations from my people, declares the Lord God.
Okay, so what instruction does God give to the princes of Israel?
Be good.
Yeah, be good. Stop abusing or taking advantage of, or whatever you guys would do. Stop abusing the people. So now, so we have prince and we have princes. Does that indicate that there may be both then in this future area, both prince and princes? It seems possible, right? He's talking to princes about the future. Okay, so those are just, again, things to kind of start thinking and listing as we talk about it.
You mean there's more than one prince?
Yes, there's the scripture keeps going back and forth to prince, and then sometimes he's speaking to princes.
Got it.
So I don't think the prince who's going to be there has been abusive. That always seems to be the directive to the princes not to do that anymore. That's what it looks like to me. we'll see as we go forward. Okay, Mary, would you read verses 10 to 12?
You shall have just balances, a just ephah, and a just bath. The ephah, am I saying that right?
I think
Ephah?
so. Mm-hmm.
The ephah and the bath shall be the same quantity, so that the bath will contain a tenth of a homer, and the ephah a tenth of a homer. Their standard shall be according to the homer. The shekel shall be 20 gerahs, 20 shekels, 25 shekels, and 15 shekels shall be your match. No, your manna.
Okay, so we don't have to understand all those measurements, right? What is this segment about?
Right. It's going to be just.
Yeah.
What's going to be just?
Their balances
The
and
balances, and who is going to have the just balances?
the princes.
The princes, right? He says you, and who was he
You.
talking about in verse 9? The
To the
princes.
princes.
So
Yeah.
you will in the future have just balances. What does
Mhm.
that imply about the past?
That there were
it
uneven and
hasn't.
they were taking from each other.
That's right. And we know that. They did not
Poor
have
people.
fair scales and measurement. They took advantage of the poor
Mhm.
people and treated themselves well. Okay, good. So all you need to know, whatever you've got there, this is either to the print or just balances or to the princes or just weights or scales, whatever word means something there to you. Because then we learn what God is saying. It doesn't mean you can look up if you want. We've done it in the past. You can look up ephah and shekel and you can get all that information if you really like that and have the time. You sure can do that. But for this study, for these purposes, we just need to really tonight see the ordinances that God's putting into place. Okay, and the system he's reintroducing. Okay, so Janelle, can you read 13 to 17 for us?
Yes. This is the offering that you shall offer: a sixth of an ephah from a homer of wheat, a sixth of an ephah from a homer of barley, and the prescribed portion of oil, namely the bath of oil, a tenth of a bath from each core, which is 10 baths, or a homer, or 10 baths are a homer. And 1 sheep from each flock of 200 from the watering places of Israel, for a grain offering, for a burnt offering, and for peace offerings, to make atonement for them, declares the Lord God. All the people of the land shall give to this offering for the prince in Israel. It shall be the prince's part to provide the burnt offerings, the grain offerings, and the drink offerings at the feasts, or the new moons, and on the Sabbaths, at all the appointed feasts of the house of Israel. He shall provide the sin offering, the grain offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offerings, to make atonement for the house of Israel.
Okay, so in general, what is this segment about?
Offerings.
Offerings. That's the very general. And now there's a couple places where I've made a couple extra notes. What are the things that you might add? What other verses might you make note of here? What are the offerings for?
It
Atonement.
seems like
Atonement.
It seems
Go
like
ahead.
one is to make atonement for the princes, and then the other is to make atonement for the people.
Okay. And for me, in verse 15 is one of the places Lisa's talking when it says for them. I think it might actually be atonement for the animals used for the offering. I'm not sure on that. I don't see people, but I've seen other places where first we have to make atonement for the uncleanness of what you're bringing. I'm not positive on that, Lisa. Bring that one back up or look that up as a question. Okay. So that's for sure. You do want to see atonement though, right? You want to look that these offerings are for atonement in general. Okay. And then who's responsible for providing for the burnt offerings?
The prince.
The prince. Now let's look, what are the things the prince has to provide? Yeah, what are the things? What are you burning? What are they burning? What's he got to provide?
Grain.
Grain,
Drink offerings.
drink. What's the first one listed up at the top?
The burnt
Yeah.
offering.
The burnt. What are they burning?
Would that be the
sheep.
animals?
Yeah, one sheep from each flock of 200. So for every 200 sheep, one sheep has to be provided. And who is providing all of these things?
The prince.
The prince. From
Prince.
what land is he providing them?
From his land.
His land.
His land.
So that might then, you can now look at those pictures of land and you could even write in there sheep, grain, drink. He's got to provide all of that. So did he need that amount of land?
Yeah.
Probably so. So
Mhm.
then where's the second use of atonement? And so this one Lisa sees for sure, we can tell this one is for whom?
House of Israel.
The house of Israel. So the offerings are to make atonement for the house of Israel. Okay? And the prince is providing. So whatever notes you want there on the side, sometimes I just star the verses. Sometimes I write, I've got things written on both sides of this one. I added a little more than what I had earlier.
To make
Again,
atonement.
if you all looked at my observation
house of
worksheets, they are
Israel.
not pretty. They are literally worksheets. They are not pretty. Okay, questions or thoughts or anything interesting on that?
Well, I got confused because I thought we're in the millennial.
Yeah,
So
we are.
Jesus has already come.
Yes.
He was the sacrifice.
Yes.
So we're still sacrificing. I'm
Okay,
confused about that.
Yeah, so that's what we're trying to find out. And you're not going to find
okay.
out this week, and you're not going to find out next week, and you might find out by the time we're done. That's what Hebrews 10 and Galatians are for, right? Is to kind of help us. So to start to see the differences. So first we have to see the differences in Jesus's sacrifice and what the old sacrifice was and what's happening in the millennial temple. Because are they exactly the same from the old and the millennial?
No.
Not exactly, right? And of course, we're not doing that kind of side-by-side in-depth study, although you could on your own. We did a little bit by looking at Leviticus, right? So that's still our question, Janelle, because you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. That is still our question. And that's what we talked about a bit last week with purpose. Like, what could be the purposes when we know it's not for salvation, right? It's not for salvation because Jesus did that already by this time. Good question. Just a good reminder. Okay.
Thanks.
So that gets me to Lisa Rector. Would you read verses 18 to 20?
Where the scriptures.
Thus says the Lord God, in the first month, on the first of the month, you shall take a young bull without blemish and cleanse the sanctuary. The priest shall take some of the blood from the sin offering and put it on the doorposts of the house, on the four corners of the ledge of the altar, and on the posts of the gate of the inner court. Thus you shall do on the seventh day of the month for everyone who goes astray or is naive. So you shall make atonement for the house.
Okay, what would you guys say this passage was about? How would you list that?
For the house of Israel.
Okay, we're making atonement for the house of Israel. We're a little more specific here.
Cleanse the sanctuary.
We're going to
Yeah.
cleanse the sanctuary when? The first of the first month. Does anybody have a bell ringing before you turn to the next segment? When is this? What's the first month of the year for the Israelites ever since Exodus? There's a feast that starts. They tell us on the next page, but what's the first? Passover. And what would be your clue in verses 18 to 20 that this would be Passover, even if you didn't recognize the date?
Putting the bloods on
On the
the
door.
On the door.
Putting the blood on the posts of the door. So this is about the future Passover sacrifice to make atonement. What kind of atonement is this according to verse 20? For whom?
Everyone.
Those who are gone astray or naive.
Everyone who's gone astray or naive. So is this for wicked, purposeful, intentional sin?
No.
No. And if you did your verses in Leviticus, did you see a segment that talked about that same thing? You may not remember, but we'll get there. So yes. So this is a specific kind of sacrifice for a specific kind of sin at a specific time. Okay. And 21 to 25, that takes me to Jocelyn.
The first month, on the 14th day of the month, you shall have the Passover, a feast of 7 days. Unleavened bread shall be eaten. On that day, the prince shall provide for himself and all the people of the land a bull for a sin offering. During the 7 days of the feast, he shall provide as a burnt offering to the Lord 7 bulls and 7 rams without blemish on every day of the 7 days, and a male goat daily for a sin offering. He shall provide as a grain offering an ephah with a bull, an ephah with a ram, and a hin of oil with an ephah. In the 7th month, on the 15th day of the month, at the feast, he shall provide like this: 7 days for the sin offering, the burnt offering, the grain offering, and the oil.
Okay, so so this is where they tell us that in the first month, this is Passover sacrifices. Who is providing the sacrificial items?
the prince.
The prince. Anybody want to do the math? So during the 7 days of the feast, for each day, he's going to provide how many bulls?
7.
How many rams?
7.
7. And
Without
a
blemish.
goat, without blemish, and a goat every day for 7 days. Right there, if I count correctly, that's 50 animals just for the week of Passover.
Something.
Plus the next part for the grain offering. What else does he have to add to the grain?
Bull.
A bull.
A ram and a
ephah.
bull, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And then
And a
again, in
hin
the
of oil.
7th month, it says he shall provide like this, meaning the same thing. Okay.
Yep.
So what else does this make you think about? What do we know God was going to do before Israel, the people returned to the land? What was God going to make sure about the land itself?
Oh, that it was capable of production and
It was restored and it was
restored.
wealthy. Remember,
Yes.
wealthy. Do you see that picture here with what the prince will be able to provide
Yeah.
for the sacrifices? Plenty of, again, 1 sheep from every 200. Every 200 would tell us that there's more than
Lots
just
of it.
200, right? So previous. Okay. Do you want a minute or two to jot down a couple notes or questions at the bottom, kind of in your empty spot there on the end of chapter 45? Again, we're just going to kind of hang on to some questions, and we're going to have to be patient and walk through the cross references and then still be patient probably. Or do you have a question you want to ask while you guys make a couple notes about 45? Oh, back to what Lisa was saying about the idea of the prince providing sacrifice. Do we see the prince having to bring sacrifice for himself? Yes. What's the verse? We have it now.
22.
22. So this prince has to make an offering for himself. Does that give you any insights into the personage of the prince or who it is not? It is not Jesus.
Right.
Will Jesus need to make an offering for himself for sin of any
No.
kind?
No.
No.
So now we have a mystery prince on top of everything else we had. I thought we knew who it was, but and I should have trusted our people who wrote the NASB because they would have capitalized it had they known for sure that it was Jesus. They would have capitalized it. So I knew there was a question mark, but it looks to me now like, oh, probably that wasn't who it is. Okay, any questions? Okay, so 46 continues this same idea, taking this picture a bit further and really focused on the prince. So again, building up all this information you see about him, that was how I kind of look and go, oh, okay. So we're going to continue. This first segment is probably one of the longer ones in the passage. I am over to Laura. Laura, can you read 1 through 10 in chapter 46?
I sure can.
Okay.
Thus says the Lord God, the gate of the inner court facing east shall be shut the 6 working days, but it shall be opened on the Sabbath day and opened on the day of the new moon. The prince shall enter by way of the porch of the gate from outside and stand by the post of the gate. Then the priest shall provide his burnt offering and his peace offerings. And he shall worship at the threshold of the gate and then go out. But the gate shall not be shut until the evening. The people of the land shall also worship at the doorway of that gate before the Lord on the Sabbaths and on the new moons. The burnt offering which the prince shall offer to the Lord on the Sabbath day shall be 6 lambs without blemish and a ram without blemish. And the grain offering shall be an ephah with the ram, and the grain offering with the lambs as much as he is able to give, and a hin of oil with an ephah. On the day of the new moon he shall offer a young bull without blemish, also 6 lambs and a ram, which shall be without blemish. And he shall provide a grain offering, an ephah with the bull, and an ephah with the ram, and with the lambs as much as he is able, and a hin of oil with an ephah. When the prince enters, he shall go in by way of the porch of the gate, and go out by the same way. But when the people of the land come before the Lord at the appointed feast, he who enters by way of the north gate to worship shall go out by the way of the south gate. And he who enters by the way of the south gate shall go out by the way of the north gate. No one shall return by the way of the gate by which he entered, but shall go straight out. When they go in, the prince shall go in among them, and when they go out, he shall go out.
Okay, so what would you say is the focus of these 10 verses? What's your big overall picture before we break it down a little bit?
Offerings of the prince's offerings.
Okay, that's pretty general because we've seen that before. This is a specific time frame. 2 time frames. Lisa? Are you
Worship
trying to-
at the east. Oh, who's Lisa?
You,
Worship at the
you're
east,
right.
yeah.
I thought you were trying to talk. Yep.
Oh, worship at the east gate for the prince, and then also for the people.
Okay, let's look for the time frame. They're in the very first verse.
On the Sabbath and the new.
On the Sabbath day and on the new moon. Okay, and then if you look, those two time frames continue throughout. So in some way, you want to indicate that these are instructions or rules, whatever word you've been using, structure for the Sabbath and the new moon. So what did we just learn is going to exist in the millennial kingdom? What day is still going to exist? Sabbath still going to exist. Now we'll look and see what some of the details are about it. First of all, who's the person we're going to be watching again?
The prince.
The prince. He's coming through what porch?
Gate
Porch.
from the outside.
The gate from, yes.
Outside and stand by the post of the gate.
Okay. And so then the priests provide his burnt offering and his peace offerings. And what is it that the prince does at this gate?
Worship.
He worships. Then who else worships?
The people of the land.
Then the people worship. Okay, then there's more offerings, but now who provides those offerings?
The prince.
The prince, and who are these being offered to?
The Lord.
The
The
Lord.
Lord on the Sabbath. Let's
On
look
the
for
Sabbath,
these. You
right.
can see what are there. Again, this is a Sabbath, so how often does the prince have to do this?
Every week.
Every week, right? So 6 lambs and a ram, an ephah of grain with a ram,
Yeah.
and how much he's able to give of some things, oil. Then on the new moon, there's another list,
Lambs.
right? A bull, 6 lambs and a ram, the grain offering, the oil, the ephah. Okay, so
Yeah.
every Sabbath and every new moon, he
day.
gives those amounts of things. So every week and then once a month, right? New moon once a month, pretty
New
much.
moon once a month. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty
Mhm.
much. Okay.
Well, he's got to have a lot.
Yeah, he does. There's
There's
that
a lot of
wealth.
helpers.
There's
Huh.
that wealth that God said he was going to build back up in the land of Israel.
Right.
And then they're going to offer it back.
That's something.
What's this picture that you get of the people coming in and out to worship? This looks like God to me.
It's orderly.
It's orderly, right? It's like 2 lines moving in opposite directions, right? A group coming in the north, they're going to go straight through, go out the south, and then the other way. I probably just did that backwards, but they're going to do that opposite. So 2 lines of people never having to run in and out of them. And who's going with them in and out?
Prince.
The prince. The prince is going too. So now we have a picture of worship on the Sabbaths and on the new moon. Okay. All right. The next surprising thing you might find, Lisa S., would you read verses 11 and 12?
At the festivals and the appointed feasts, the grain offering shall be an ephah with a bull and an ephah with a ram, and with the lambs as much as one is able to give, and a hin of oil with an ephah. When the prince provides a freewill offering, a burnt offering, or peace offering as a freewill offering to the Lord, the gate facing east shall be open for him, and he shall provide his burnt offering and his peace offerings as he does on the Sabbath day. Then he shall go out, and the gate shall be shut after he goes out.
Okay. So what other time frames would we say these are about where the prince is going to make offerings? These are offerings for the
When he wants to.
The
when he
festival.
wants to, but there's some specific ones as well from verse 11.
Oh, yeah,
Festivals.
festivals and appointed
Festivals,
feasts.
appointed feasts, and then there's other types of offering that the priests can do as free will, and then the same list that we saw earlier. And then where is he going to make them, or what's open for him?
Gate.
Facing the
East
Gate.
Gate. So again, I can get it all the way up through here, and we hit this verse, and then I'm just like, I don't know what to think because now I have conflicting information. It feels like conflicting information in my head, but probably missing something. So at the East Gate,
Because the East Gate was closed.
it was
The
closed
Spirit-
because the Lord entered it. So again,
It's going to be open.
There's an inner gate, east gate though.
yes, there is an inner East Gate and that one. So that's what I'm guessing there's something I'm missing here in the order, or also, yeah, there this may indicate who's allowed or who has this special. Already about this prince, is this a very unique and special person we're looking at?
Yes.
Yes, because first of all, what does it say that he's not, that we would expect to be the people making all these offerings? Who would normally be doing this?
The
The priests.
The priest.
big guy.
The priest would be doing the offerings. And so we have somebody who's called a prince, but we haven't been told that he's a priest or he's from any line, or we don't know. We actually literally do not know who he is. So there's a lot of unique, but those are the kind of things that you want as something jumps out at you, kind of get that list. I don't know if it'll matter in the long run, but it's a very unique picture that we have.
And what strikes me is I don't see any evil, but but if when you're providing everything for everything, and there's a reason behind it, and I don't know what that reason is.
That's right. Some of that I think we'll be able to reason out with Hebrews and Galatians tonight or next week. And then some of it we'll know for sure if it was necessary. And some people do probably already thinking about it. By the time we finish the end homework, we have some passages from Revelation that will help us see what was actually going on in this 1,000 years that we don't see right now. You're right, Fran. We're just reasoning that it must exist because God's calling for these offerings that we just said were for atonement of sin. So, and that there is some really good stuff coming up, that the last couple lessons that will help you look at, again, we need to remember who all is here at this time frame. Who are those 3 people groups that exist? And your homework's going to go into more detail about that, which I didn't even know they have. I'm really grateful that they do. So hopefully it will be helpful. All right, where am I? Evelyn, can you read 13 to 15? We'll just put 13 with those 2 verses.
And you shall provide a lamb a year old without blemish for a burnt offering to the Lord daily. Morning by morning you shall provide it. Also, you shall provide a grain offering with it morning by morning, a 6/7 ephah and a third of a hin of oil to moisten the fine flour. A grain offering to the Lord continually by a perpetual ordinance. Thus they shall provide the lamb, the grain offering, and the oil, morning by morning, for a continual burnt offering.
Okay, so what label would you give these offerings?
Overkill.
Yeah, I heard somebody mutter one way you could list it.
There's song morning by morning.
Morning by morning, or just offering to the Lord daily.
Daily,
morning by morning, right? That's God being, definite, but daily. This is a daily offering to the Lord. um, again, of a burnt offering, a grain offering, perpetually, continually. Okay, so daily offerings now.
So there's going to be, Lori just said there's going to be a lot of smoke there. If
Yeah,
there's
and again,
daily burnt
I don't
offerings.
know if it will add up to the level of what they had before, but
Yeah.
yes, it's an interesting picture. But Leviticus helps you to see how God feels about that continual smoke as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stephanie,
Question.
looks
I
like
have a
yeah,
question.
yeah.
On verse 13, who is you?
Yeah.
Who's the you that's supposed to provide the
Well,
daily?
I'm not really sure, Lisa. I would still say it's the prince based on verse 12, even though they say he. Scripture does that sometimes. It goes from he to you. So in my mind, I'm still calling it the prince, also because he's provided all the other offerings. It could refer possibly back to, oh, I think that's too far back. I was going to say when the priests provide for him.
Then 15 says, they shall provide the lamb.
Yeah, and then it says they. Yeah, so maybe it's the priests in this case providing, because there was a verse that said, he should
Well, on,
provide.
in Ezekiel 45:9, it says, you princes of Israel.
Yeah, you princes, that's way too far back for just grammatical purposes, to refer a pronoun back to there. Yeah, I'm not sure on that one, Lisa. I've had my own questions about it. I didn't mark it exactly. Um,
No, thank you. I had a question by it, so thank you.
Yeah, I'll try to remember to look at comments, see if I can find somebody who says something about it. Anybody else look or know?
When it goes on, maybe there's some clarity there.
Maybe it does say they in that very same one. Then it
Well,
goes
that-
right to the prince in verse 16. So
Yeah, in 16, it talks about the prince's sons
yeah, that's
inheritance.
right, because we're changing topics now in verse 16. We're
Mm.
not even talking about the offerings anymore. So I'm not
Right.
sure that that's a helpful direction. So if everybody
Okay.
wants to put a question mark there, see what you can find out. We can try to add that on to our discussion for next week. It was something I ended up with an unscheduled appointment today, so lost a bit of time today. Okay, we'll see. Maybe we'll find out. Okay. In general, I'm thinking it's a reference to priest or prince, even though 15 says they, but I'm not sure. Okay, so the daily offerings, verses 16 to 18. Now we can go to Stephanie because the little girls said goodnight now and they're not there anymore. So right when I was going to call you, I looked and I went, oh, probably not. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're on verse 19 then, because I kind of lost track.
16 to 18.
Okay. Thus says the Lord God, if the prince gives a gift out of his inheritance to any of his sons, it shall belong to his sons. It is their possession by inheritance. But if he gives a gift from his inheritance to one of his servants, it shall be his until the year of liberty. Then it shall return to the prince. His inheritance shall be only his sons. It shall belong to them. The prince shall not take from the people's inheritance, thrusting them out of their possession. He shall give his sons inheritance from his own possession, so that my people will not be scattered, anyone from his possession.
Okay, we learn a lot here. What do you learn about the prince? We could just put it that way. What do you learn here?
The prince's gifts are his son's inheritance.
Okay, so the prince can have sons. What does that mean?
It must be married.
The prince is married. The prince can have children. So that should add to your general picture of life during the millennial kingdom, right? Which is going to become very important to you if you haven't already remembered that. Does life, including birth of new people, go on in the millennial kingdom? Yes. New people who didn't already know the Jewish law, new people who might be living with Gentile, well, this wouldn't read for them, and new people who also have to be taught about whom, even though he's
God.
right there.
Christ.
Jesus, right?
Jesus.
Okay,
Mhm.
remember that for 1,000 years, new people are being born
Hmm.
who will have to make what kind of decision for themselves
Whether to believe or not.
to believe or not. Okay, again, I think sometimes we get our I know I do this. I think eternity rules when I'm talking or thinking or learning about the millennial kingdom, and I always have to remind myself it's not the same thing, and we know that based on what happens on day 1000 of the millennial kingdom. So this is a prince who's married and has children, and then what would we call the prince's sons? This is something we could think about. What titles would they have? What would they be?
Prince,
Princes. They would become
little prince.
princes. They'll be princes. So we definitely will have princes, even though there is a prince. So they have an inheritance that's from him, right? Which God reiterates something he said earlier. This keeps the princes from doing what?
oppressing the people.
That's right. They do not need to take, first of all, they have a lot of land already, as we've seen. We haven't seen the division of the land of the people yet, so just keep that in mind. We've seen what we marked in those boxes, except for the prince's allotment. Who does that all belong to in the center? Whose allotment did we start with at the beginning of the night?
The priests.
But whose was it called? Who does it belong to?
God's.
It's the Lord's
Lord.
allotment. That's where we started, verse 45. So far, we've seen the land for the Lord and the land for the prince. We haven't seen the division for the people yet, right? There's a city and there's an allotment there in God's part for the whole house of Israel. But have you seen any listing yet of the tribes of Israel?
No.
No. Does anybody know? Are we going to? If you looked at that map that Lori pointed out for us, you'll probably be able to tell if we're going to. I haven't looked at it, but I'm guessing because all the other ones have it. Okay, so this is inheritance for the princes, or the land for princes, however you want to word that. And looks like I am back to the beginning. Fran, could you read 19 and 20?
18 through 21.
Just 19 and 20.
Okay. Then he brought me through the entrance, which was at the side of the gate, into the holy chambers for the priests, which faced north. And behold, there was a place at the extreme rear toward the west. He said to me, "This is the place where the priests shall boil the guilt offerings and the sin offering, and where they shall bake the grain offering, in order that they may not bring them out into the outer court to transmit holiness to the people."
Okay, so within those priests area, what will we have? What are these two verses about? Chambers for what?
Boil the guilt offering.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Boiling and
boiling
baking.
and baking or cooking offerings, right? Cooking offerings in the chambers of the priests. Okay,
Right.
that's
Chambers
all
for
we
the
need.
priest.
Yep. Okay, and then Dee Dee, verses 21 to 24, which takes us to the end of the chapter.
Oh, she's silent.
Oh, Dee Dee.
Mouse problems. Then he brought me out of the outer court and led me across to the four corners of the court. And behold, in every corner of the court there was a small court. In the four corners of the court there were enclosed courts, 40 cubits long and 30 wide. Those four in the corners were the same size. There was a row of masonry around about in them, around the four of them, and boiling places were made under the rows round about. Then he said to me, these are the boiling places where the ministers of the house shall boil the sacrifices of the people.
Okay, so what's this segment about? Courts?
Places, yep. Places
Yeah.
to prepare the people's sacrifices.
Okay, yep. And I would use the word courts because they did courts. They did chambers in the other one. They did courts in this one, but it's not that big a deal. That's just how I try to get my brain to remember the differences in places. Okay, so we see this picture of temple that sounds very much like um, the picture that we would have seen if we were studying the Old Testament, right? And some of you have studied various parts of the Old Testament. So I think we have time. So again, Janelle's question again, why? And we talked about some of that last week to start to make lists of what do you think, what were some of the things God could be teaching, right? If God spent this much biblical territory talking about this, then there's a purpose for it, right? Plus, he built it, right? He said, build this, meaning he has a reason for what he's going to do. And maybe now, as we've kind of, again, tried to visualize the timing of this, maybe it's starting to kind of help you do that. I think you're literally going to have to try to picture, put yourself into what this world will be like of the millennial kingdom. So what I want to do is I do want to talk about the references from the Old Testament, the Leviticus ones that focused on the same names of offerings that we see offered here by Ezekiel. And what I want you to do is I'm just going to divide them up. I'll give you a couple minutes to look. You can either look at your notes or you can just read the passage again and look. I really just want the simple answer of what was the purpose of the offering? Like, what's the offering and what was it for? We don't need to reiterate all the details about what they're burning. What was the offering? What was it for? And then if there was any kind of thing that was really significant that you noticed. So 7:10, perfect. I'm going to give different passages to two of you at a time. So Fran and Laura, would you take Leviticus 1, 1-5 and verse 14? That's on the burnt offering. And then Dee Dee and Jocelyn, I'm not going to group you up, but just the two of you will have this to report to us on. Leviticus 2, 1-3, that's the grain offering. And then Lisa and Stephanie, would you do Leviticus 4, 1-12, that's the sin offering. Evelyn and Janelle, Leviticus 5, 1-6, the guilt offering. And then Lori and Mary, Leviticus 7, 11-18, the peace offering. Okay. I'm going to leave the video up, but I'm again going to pop out and get some water or something so that I don't bother you. I'll give you somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes, depending on how ready you all look when I get back. Okay.
Chris, what are
Yeah.
we supposed to do with what are we doing? We're going to explain what the peace offering is.
Yeah, no, you're just gonna tell me what it was and what it was for. That's the main thing we're looking
Oh,
for, is what
okay.
was the purpose of it. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yeah. Okay, let's start with the people that have the first one, and we can all help each other fill in as need be. And I did a really weird, like, different order. So I think I have Fran and Laura. Is that right? Okay, I should have made notes. All right, what did you ladies find out about the burnt offering from Leviticus 1?
It had to be a male from the herd without defect, or
Okay,
you could use a bird. They could use a
okay,
bird, a dove,
yes,
or a pigeon.
okay,
It would be offered at the doorway of the tent, not in their meeting place, instead of like a tent, of course, instead of a temple.
okay,
For atonement, was offered on for atonement on their behalf. The ram or the bird were slayed or next rung. And if Aaron's sons or priests should offer the blood and sprinkle it on the mantle, on the doorway.
okay.
Mhm.
So burnt offering, were there similarities then to the burnt offering that you just off the top of your head to what we saw?
Yes.
And
Mhm.
what is the purpose? And let's put a verse to it so everybody can add it and look back later.
Be for the atonement, verse 4.
Uh-huh. Yes. So that
Atonement.
it may be accepted for him, right? Accepted before the Lord to make atonement on his behalf, right? So a burnt offering is to make atonement.
Mm-hmm.
Is that similar to what's happening in Ezekiel?
Mhm.
So if in the old, so these are kind of things you want to think, we don't have to answer this, But if God says that previously they needed to make atonement for the sin or to make things clean, and then he says that in the future, will those things exist then? Will sin and uncleanness exist if you have to make atonement for them? Does it say anywhere that that will save you? No, it doesn't. It just says it's an offering for sin. Okay, those are the way you kind of want to keep things in mind. Who did I do? Dee Dee and Jocelyn? Is that what I did? Next? Okay, were you next? Leviticus 2, the grain offering? Okay, what did you guys learn?
Well, it's flour, olive oil, and frankincense, and only a handful is burned, and that is a memorial portion. And I looked up memorial portion in Strong's. So it acknowledges dedication. It is a worshiper's dedication and acknowledgement of God's provision and sovereignty.
Okay, good. A memorial portion, and there's one more thing. We don't really have as much purpose with this one, but there's one more interesting point about the smoke.
Pleasing aroma.
That's right, Jocelyn. Thank you. It's a soothing or pleasing aroma to the Lord. So the Lord looks on this with pleasure when they burn the grain offering. So we have atonement and making a pleasing aroma as the people offer this to him. And that's good to see as memorial in gratitude. That's good to see.
And then the rest of it was for the priest's food.
Okay, yes, and we see that it has uses, right? When they do these things, the priests get fed through these offerings as well. Good point. Thanks, Dee Dee. Okay, now I have no idea. Lisa and Stephanie, is that it? My guess. Oh, look at that. I got it right. Leviticus 4 for which offering was that?
The sin offering.
The sin offering. Well, they kind of that should be some of the purpose, I'll guess. But what did you guys learn about it? It's a longer passage.
If anybody sins unintentionally and does what is forbidden in any of the Lord's commands, a young bull without defect is offered as a sin offering.
Okay, so what kind of sin are we talking about in this particular kind, Lisa?
Unintentional.
Unintentional, right? So these are the things that they did and that we're going to do, right? You're going to, especially for them, they're going to accidentally come upon a dead body and not know it and not have meant to do that. And then when they did, they were sorry for it, right? We'd have to think a little harder about the things where we might accidentally sin, but they certainly had so many regulations that it would probably have been fairly easy to sin unintentionally. Okay, I have my other Lisa in this group too. Anything else you and Stephanie, you guys got that you want to note? There's lots of details about it, but really you probably got most of what you need to know for sure. Anything else that you just noted or thought was interesting?
Well, I just noted that we didn't get the whole chapter 4 to read, but the offering changed depending on who was doing the unintentional sinning.
Okay.
So
yeah, there's levels and layers of things when God gets very detailed to see. But again, we see these same things: blood, sacrifice on the horns. Okay. And for unintentional sin. All right. And we had the guilt offering, right? Is that the next one? And then is that Evelyn and Janelle? Is that who it was?
Yep.
Okay. Leviticus 5, 1-6. Guilt offering.
So you'd be guilty if you saw or heard a confession that someone sinned, and so you would sin by not testifying.
Okay.
You could sin by touching an animal or a dead body. That would be unclean.
Yeah, there's a key here though, because you could do that accidentally. It gets specific. What's the key that makes this a guilt sin and not just the unintentional sin?
Deliberately.
It's
You do
verse 2 that
deliberately.
tells us what this means. It's the very end, right? If we just read verse 2, I'll read it for you if you guys want to follow along. If a person touches any unclean thing, whether a carcass of an unclean animal, or the carcass of unclean cattle, or a carcass of unclean swarming things, though it is hidden from him and he is unclean, then he will be guilty. If you keep on and through verse 3, I'm sorry, I thought it was in 2. It's hidden from him, and then he comes to know it, he will be guilty, right? Because if that happened to you, they had things they were supposed to do, as in the last one, they're supposed to confess that and make a guilt offering, make a sin offering. But if you find out you've been unclean and you don't do that, then now you're guilty, right? Now you've got a guilt offering that needs to be made. Does that make sense? You guys see those places? So the
Yeah.
end of verse 3 is the key to that. And it's the same thing if you go on, even in talking, right? If he comes to know it, that's the key phrase. If you did it unintentionally, but then you come to know it, that's the key. Okay, and I guess what else, anything else you noted there? I guess there's a lot of ways you could have looked at them, but the simple way is to just look and then think about the similarities and the differences. What's the other word we see here that what will happen for you if you do this, if you make this guilt offering?
Well, you're making atonement, so it would be forgiveness.
Yes, you still get to make atonement, but you have to make this guilt offering now instead of the sin offering before. So it's always that reminder that God thinks of everything. All right, is that the
I had a
last?
note I wanted to share about that. Sacrifice minus true faith and true repentance and obedience was hypocrisy and therefore sin in itself.
Yeah, so that's where we're going to head. That's what we need to learn about. What did God always intend about that sacrificial system? Did it work? What did he always intend or show about Jesus when he made that one? And why on earth, again, still, what would be the purpose for having some of it still exist in the millennial kingdom, right? So that's what you want to keep trying to piece together. So next week, we will stay with this chapter, or 45 and 46, and we'll discuss the Hebrews and Galatians passages. Those are such great passages. I love that Galatians. I love Hebrews too, but the Galatians one just reminds me so much of our covenant study. Hebrews does too, but those are great passages. Spend some time with them, maybe beyond what the homework asked you. The other thing it would be really good for you to do, if you're really still looking at this idea, is to go back and make a really good list about what you learn about the prince, because you don't have any new homework. So that would be a good thing if you wanted to do that. I want to make sure we get each of these ideas down thoroughly. Let me double check and make sure that I wasn't planning on assigning any homework. Any other questions while I look for my calendar note here? No, that's good. You don't need to go into chapter 47 yet. So if this is a good catch-up moment, if you didn't get Hebrews and Galatians finished, you can do those again. And then also you could make a list about what you learn about the prince. It just might help you look and see if you're wondering who that is. Again, it won't give you the answer, but it again will show you who it's not. That's what it did for me. So, okay, I'm going to let the video end, and we will be sticking with chapters 45, 46, really just the trying to piece together what does this mean to us, the people who know Jesus has already come as this, and what could we maybe be learning from it? What does God want us to learn?